everyone. There we go. We have mic action now. Thank you for your patience, and please accept our apologies for the delayed start, but hopefully that just gave you a chance to enjoy the networking a little bit longer. And I think it's really fantastic to see still such a big audience, even though this is the graveyard shift panel. When numbers tend to thin out, and I think this is really a great indication of the interest that we've been able to generate in investment in Tunisia, and your participation is very much appreciated and enjoyed by all of us. So, as this is the final plenary, what we're hoping to do here is join the dots a little bit and tie together all the various discussions that took place throughout today and with the opening panels yesterday. So we've been hearing quite a lot about the opportunities that Tunisia holds in multiple sectors and in multiple different attributes that it possesses that can be interesting for foreign companies. But we've also heard about efforts to develop some more organically grown business and to promote startups and an innovation ecosystem locally, which is extremely exciting. Lots of things happening on that front. But of course, we've also talked about some of the challenges. No investment environment on earth is perfect. There are always things that can be improved. And you can see from the active engagement at the highest levels of government in this conference that they are eager to have your feedback as business people and to continue to work to improve the investment environment and make the landscape as attractive for business as possible. So what we've assembled here, a group of gentlemen that can talk us through about that and really reflect on, given everything we've heard over the past 2 days, what is the way forward for Tunisia? What are the key takeaways from this event? And we'll be giving the minister a bit of homework that he can take away with him with regards to the investment environment. Let me introduce them to you. Please, guys, I don't think I have you sitting in the order that I have on my sheet here, but give a wave when I introduce you. We have Samir Abiyankar. He is a partner at TPG Growth and looks after the group's African investments. We have Michael Green, founder of the Social Progress Imperative. He's also something of a star on the TED Talk circuit. I think one of his talks got viewed more than 4 million times, so please go on there on YouTube and check it out. We have Karim Hijaji. He's COO of Santander, of course, with a lot of experience in banking internationally, and I believe a native of Tunisia, if I'm not wrong. So it must be interesting for you to see how things have developed here. And last but certainly not least, we have His Excellency Minister Ziad Lathari, Minister of Investment, Development, and International Cooperation. So I would like to start first with the minister, and I guess we've heard a little bit already, but if you can articulate for us your broad vision for investment and business in Tunisia, and what do you see as still being on your to-do list?
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be with you and to see really the enthusiasm of our partners to support this investment dynamism in the country. And I think the kind of event is very important because Tunisia suffered these recent years from a negative perception related to the transition period. When our president met President Obama just a few years ago, he told him he has good news and bad news for you. So the good news, you are a democracy. And he said, and the bad news, you are a democracy. So Tunisia actually, these recent years, engaged tremendous political change. And the democratic change was a big challenge for the country. It was a big challenge for the country in terms of actually stabilizing the country while building strong democratic institutions. And a political transition has an economic cost. And Tunisia, as a part also of a very difficult and turbulent regional environment, suffered from that. But when you see the fundamentals of the country, you say that you have strong fundamentals of the economy in terms, especially in terms of the quality of the human resources we have in the country. And from this point of view, democracy is really an opportunity for the country. It was quite challenging on the short term because it is a kind of huge change for a country, for a society, for a population to move from an dictatorship and authoritarian regime to an open and democratic society. But it's the kind of change that brings some instability on the short term, but creates the condition for a long-term stability. This is the true stability, because it is based on very strong democratic foundations. And from this point of view, we have the vision that this unique experience in the region in terms of democratic transition and democratic change is also something unique in terms of economic potential to build also something unique in terms of a country open to business, and in terms of country open to the world, and in terms of a country be able to be ahead of the huge changes we are witnessing in this world and we will witness in the next few years. So our vision is to have a country which plays an important and a huge and a major role regionally. We see Tunisia regarding its strategic location and position, the heart of the Mediterranean between Europe and Africa and the Middle East, as a bridge. We see Tunisia as a gateway to Africa and to the whole region, and we see it as also a land of excellency, a land of knowledge-based economy, and a land of innovation and of a creation and constant modernization. The last Bloomberg Index, Innovation Index, Tunisia ranked first in the region, in Africa and the Middle East. Tunisia made huge progress in the doing business ranking, thanks to the efforts we deployed recently to improve our business climate. Tunisia just yesterday in the last SDGs Africa Index ranked first in the continent. So we are witnessing greater trust in this country, and all the difficulties we know these recent years and in this transition period now I think are behind us, and we are in a good dynamic of putting Tunisia in the heart of the regional dynamism economically and politically, and Tunisia will, I'm sure, play a stronger positive role in the whole region. So this is the vision we have, and we are working with different reforms in the different sectors, and especially working with you, with the private sector representatives, to make all this happen, and to be open to all the initiatives coming from the private sector and businesses to make this country more attractive and more competitive than ever before.
Thank you for that. If I could ask just one follow-up question, what do you see as your few most urgent priorities in relation to the investment environment? What is top of your to-do list in the next 6 months?
I think that continue to digitalize the interaction we have with investors. Last yesterday we launched the new digital platform. I think this is a huge progress with Tunisia Investment Authority. Will enlarge this to the different agencies regarding investment. So offering the best support to investors and offering the best actually services to our partners, consider them as clients and offer them the best service. I think this is the kind of thing we hear regularly from investors, how to de-bureaucratize the relation, the interaction we have with investors. This should continue to top our priorities in the next few months.
Yes, and that's quite right, because having these functions easily done online is the best way to speed things up, and it's also moves towards a goal of transparency as well. I want to turn to Michael now. So, you know, investment for its own sake and even economic growth for its own sake is all well and good, but really none of that matters unless these things actually improve people's lives and help the social fabric and help social progress. And this, of course, is your area of expertise. So we'd love to hear from you. How can investment, growth, and economic development lead the way towards social cohesion, progress, and I guess general happiness of people in Tunisia and elsewhere? And I understand you have some slides to share with us. If we can get Michael's slides going.
Thanks, Courtney, and good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Courtney said, my organisation produces something called the Social Progress Index, which we developed in partnership with Professor Michael Porter of Harvard Business School. The idea of the Social Progress Index is to measure a country's performance entirely based on social and environmental outcome measures. So there's no GDP, no economic metrics in the Social Progress Index. Not because the economy doesn't matter, but what we want to understand is, how does the economy drive better lives for individuals? And we've been doing this since 2014. We rank 146 countries. And you'll see just up now, here are the 2018 results. And Tunisia ranks 48th in the world. 48? What does that mean? Well, what you see is that there's a tier one set of countries, a Premier League of countries that are leading the way on social progress, ranging from Norway to Canada. There's a set of tier two countries, including G7 countries like France, Italy, and notably the United States. The United States is just 25th, plus some of the newer members of the EU, some emerging markets like Uruguay or Costa Rica. And then the tier three is where Tunisia sits, with some very rich countries like the UAE, with some EU countries like Romania and Bulgaria, and a lot of emerging markets. This is where Tunisia is sitting with its competitors and is very near the top of the table. So I think this is good news for Tunisia overall. And most importantly, the best news for Tunisia is you beat Morocco. Congratulations. So Tunisia seems to be doing pretty well on social progress. Why does this matter for foreign direct investment and for economic development? Well, maybe you could take us through to the next slide if you could. And I should say I've tweeted out a link to all the data on the hashtag for the conference if anyone wants to follow it. So if you just pop up the next slide if you could. What I've done here is I've plotted social progress on the vertical axis, higher is better, against GDP per capita on the horizontal axis, just for fun. And all the dots are the countries of the world, and then I've put the regression line through it to show the average relationship. What you want to see here is, where is Tunisia? Tunisia is above the line. What that means is Tunisia is one of the countries that's doing a good job at turning its wealth into social progress, and that's a good thing. What it also shows us is that Tunisia has the social foundations of a country that's richer. And I think exactly to your point, Minister, this is good news for Tunisia, that the economy thrives in a successful society. And in this conference, we've talked about things like education, infrastructure, health, rule of law, anti-corruption. All those things are factors in the Social Progress Index. All these are factors that are good for investment and good for business. So I think the Social Progress Index tells a very positive story about Tunisia's foundations for future development and future economic growth. I also want to say something about this issue of the Sustainable Development Goals. We've done our own projections on progress towards the SDGs, and the world has a big problem. On current trends, by our calculations, the world is only going to hit the SDG targets not in 2030, but in 2094. So the world is wildly off track on the SDGs. And so it's going to be really important to find ways to accelerate that progress. And part of the good news is we're seeing a growing legion of investors starting to think about ways of investing in the SDGs. So I think there's an opportunity here for Tunisia, not just as a commercial destination for investment, but also one that has the economic and the social returns that will help to deliver on the SDGs. And if Tunisia is offering those opportunities for economic and social progress, I think the prospects for investment in Tunisia are very bright. Can I just finish with one comment from our data? I've heard a lot at the conference about Tunisia's success being built on the investment in education. And certainly in our data, we see that Tunisia is doing well on education. But compared to your competitors, compared to countries of similar GDP per capita, the performance is not yet exceptional. And I think that's a caution about the need to continue the investment in education, that to keep pushing ahead, to stay ahead of your competitors. And I was very struck in the data how one of the weak areas for Tunisia was on high school dropout rate. And I think it's primarily a problem for boys. So whereas some countries have problems of gender equity in education about girls not in school, Tunisia, actually like countries like Sweden, has an issue about boys dropping out of high school. And that's a weakness in the education system that needs to be addressed. So I think education is the right priority. Don't let it go. Keep pushing, Minister.
Thank you, Michael. It's very obvious what the benefits for a country are for doing well on this metric. How much do companies and investors care about this, and why should they?
We had a study done a couple of years ago by Deloitte looking at foreign direct investment and social progress, and they very clearly saw there was a pattern that high levels of social progress are useful in attracting foreign direct investment, creating good environments for business, because business does want those environments to work in. And I think what we're also seeing about this data is how investors, fund managers are looking at this data now to help guide investments. Because if you've got a country that's got a higher level of social progress, that also is telling you something about lower risk, which then also affects the flow of capital to countries. So this is really sort of not just social data, but financially important data for investors and for businesses.
I suppose it also helps create a certain kind of stability as well, which is then advantageous for business.
Absolutely. I think that strong social foundations are a positive signal about the stability of a country for the long term.
Thank you. And Minister, is this sort of thing top of mind for you, and how much does this need for marrying business and investment with social progress part of your agenda?
I think this is something fundamental for us as a country. I think the Tunisian model has been built from scratch on this social progress ideal. So this is something we need in the country, as this is something we value a lot. And I think one of the major messages of this political change that happened in Tunisia just a few years ago, even if we are focusing more on the political side of it, is the social demand from the people. And I think that one of the challenges is how to address this social demand and social progress demand in the country. And actually, the way the different governments addressed that in Tunisia was actually by raising the level of social expenditures in the country, but not maybe investing at the same time much effort and energy and money in the investment in the productive system in the country. We cannot address the social progress demand only by social means, but also by stimulating the growth in the country. And this is the kind of answer we would like to focus on more now, because we think that it is important to offer not only charity to the people or just social aid, but also to give them sustainable means to be able to address their needs. And this is why we consider that investing in growth and investing in the productive system and investing in the economy is really much more important than just investing in the social aid system in the country. At the same time, improving the quality of the social services in the country and improving the quality of the infrastructure, the social infrastructure in the country, and also introducing new ways to address this challenge, especially by, for example, stimulating the PPP infrastructure in the country and innovating in terms of financing the social demand in the country. So I think this is something very relevant to us, and maybe the challenge is also how to explain to the people and to explain to them how we translate the different reforms we are doing, for example, in business climate and the economic reforms, how to translate them in the everyday life of our citizens. This is the link that is not necessarily obvious for them to perceive, and this is a challenge for us in terms of communication, but also in terms of designing the right public policies to address the real expectations and the real aspirations of our people, especially the youth and the people in the regions, in the fragile regions and the fragile population and the most vulnerable population in Tunisia.
That's quite right, because the public gets quite fatigued with reforms if they can't connect that to an improvement in their lives. And further to the picking up on the point about financing and actually public-private collaboration, I want to turn to Samir, and hoping you can talk to us a little bit about how the government and other potential partners in the Tunisian private sector can better attract the attention, first of all, can best work together, and secondly, better attract the attention of global private markets.
Sure. So I suppose a few comments that touch upon some of the things that we discussed. I think the first point is very true that Tunisia is definitely a really unique country within the African landscape. I cover our investment activities across the continent, and it's one of those few countries where, in terms of just know-how, IP, capabilities of people, level of, let's say, technological sophistication of the businesses that we find in Tunisia is really remarkable and probably ahead of what we find in most of, let's say, the competing countries in the North African region or in Sub-Saharan Africa. So that's a huge positive. I think the aspects around attracting further private capital from outside of the country, so folks like us invest globally, we don't have any country allocations, we chase sort of a combination of financial returns, but also through the RISE fund, which is a social impact fund that we raised a couple of years ago of $2 billion, we are looking for businesses that are specifically helping the societies in which they work. So we focus on financial services, healthcare, education, food and agriculture, and renewables. We feel these are sectors that are very closely aligned to the SDGs, and therefore we have an affirmative, let's say, direction to find businesses in these sectors. What Tunisia needs to do a better job of, from our perspective, is get a handle of the vital signs of the macro. I think the micro stories are all very interesting. It's the macro indicators, the vital signs of FX, interest rates, and inflation, which are really the core underpinnings when one talks about sort of investment environment, business environment. We spend a lot of time talking about removing bureaucracy, removing red tape, making it easier to invest. But at the end of the day, these are the three vital signs that investors look at, and we're looking at obviously improving trends, but also stability of where we think things are going to go over the next 3, 4, 5, 7 years. Because unlike speculators who come in and get out, that's not at all what we do. We invest behind a plan and behind a 5-year, 7-year outlook. So therefore, you do need to really be confident as to where are these three vital signs of any economy going. I think that's the one area that if there's any plea for the government to really focus on, and I think if they can get their handle on that, there's really no limits to what can be done in the country.
How would you benchmark Tunisia in attractiveness against other African markets?
So it's very different. I think it's very rare to find a country like Tunisia that has the businesses stack up in one way against European businesses, and that's the fantastic thing about Tunisia, that you can actually invest behind companies whose revenue pools are coming out of Europe, euro-denominated revenue pools, dinar-based cost structure. That's a fantastic arbitrage to play. At the same time, the Tunisian mindset also allows the entrepreneurs to actually succeed in Africa, where price and accessibility is the core attributes of success. So it's fantastic to find a country like Tunisia where you have businesses that can play both at the top end of the sophistication chain, but also have the ability to go down. That just means that in terms of geographical expansion and revenue diversification, you can look north and south, which I don't think you can say for many other countries in Africa.
Thank you very much. And I want to talk a little bit about fintech, because fintech is obviously an exciting sector which is around the world attracting interest, but it is also a useful tool for social progress and economic movement. I mean, access to financial services, the ability to make payments, and just allowing the whole population to be banked and bankable, as it were, is a great tool for this. So Karim, you have an area of expertise in this, and also looking at it from the perspective of a major global bank, which is actually also being challenged by some fintech disruptors. How do you think Tunisia can take advantage of this change and harness the fintech sector for future development?
Thank you, Courtney. Because maybe talking about the fintech, what is at stake here is not only payment, by the way. When you look at the banking industry, first, I mean, e-banking itself, i.e. the capacity to attract money and to distribute it to the economy is digitalized a lot. Classic trading activity, for instance, FX today, when you look at the investment banks, the FX desk are robotized a lot, trade finance, and naturally speaking, payment. So what is at stake here is really what's the cars makers industry crossed, I mean, a few years ago, which is actually the business of the banker. It's just to simplify, to get the money and to distribute it, and the rest is going maybe to be invested by other actors of the market. So we're coming back to digital, and the fintech are the natural provider of expertise and technology for this new banking industry. I think in Tunisia we have the right ecosystem to do it. First, we are mature in terms of banking systems, and we may even say that we are overbanked, right? We have private bankers, we have retails, we have business banking, we have the brokerage industry on one hand, and the other hand we have foreign banks which can bring experience, and we have as well the technology expertise. So the mix of them is not only to create the capacity to make our banking industry more performant, but maybe also to be a provider in terms of financial technology for the banks here in Tunisia and the rest of the world. If we couple this with another concept, which is the BPO, the business process outsourcing. Two metrics. Technology. In Europe, we are going to have a gap of almost 1 million of technology experts. So in the coming years, that's why you see the Tunisian engineer going to Europe, exactly the same number in the United States. And we know already that it could be not provided, self-provided by European countries. So this is the big trend, i.e. the world is going to be short in terms of technology expertise. BPO itself, which is business processing outsourcing, this is a market which is going to be 350 billion. So imagine Tunisia taking 1% of it. Huge market. So this BPO is really the capacity to, for Tunisia to manage part of the processes of banks or other industrial company. Concretely speaking, some example, we've seen today the experience of Expensia. Expensia can manage today the T&E, travel and expenses processes from Tunisia. We can do it for the banking, especially the backside, back office, middle office, part of the technology development, segments of the technology like testing, and it is being done, actually. And this is a huge market, and I think in Tunisia we have the right capacity to do it in terms of ecosystem and in terms of expertise. This being said, I think it will need some condition of success. Education, and maybe here I am going to be counter-trendy. Sure, we have good education, we have good engineers, etc., but we have to adapt, and we have to add soft skills, languages, culture. We are turning to France culture as a focal point. Maybe we have to open as well to Asian culture, as well as to the Anglo-Saxon culture. Second, to market it. I mean, okay, so we are focusing how to get the investor, but the money does exist. And if you talk with Samir, better, I mean, even we don't have enough big projects. The tickets are small. There is huge money which needs to be invested. Look at the UK market, for instance, the private equity. So I don't think the problem is to get money. I think the problem is to sell ourselves, to have the right marketing, the right communication. This should be a partnership between the private and the public sector. It is starting. I mean, tremendous job was done by you guys, I mean, and the government, by the FIPA, by private as well, like Smart Tunisia and other initiatives like this. I think now we have to frame it in a strategy. We cannot do everything. When you talk about the BPO, for instance, I'm not sure about the big company. I think it's too late maybe for Tunisia to invest in the big company, but we have to target the SMEs, the small corporates in Europe, and start really segmenting the market and take some advantageous position in this area.
Yes, it's an interesting point about the BPO because I haven't heard a huge amount about that, but it's an interesting industry that can combine some capabilities in general services and technology and so on, and it's also a really excellent way to upskill the workforce because you can start with the functions that can be handled and move gradually up the chain, and a lot of countries, including very small ones, have had a lot of success using this model, so it's quite an interesting point.
Exactly, and that's where, you know, today, this morning, we had the, by the way, I love this presentation. I mean, it's medtech, right? It's the ability via the digital to offer to the Tunisian citizen free consultation, medical consultation. If we make the parallel between the banking and the medical sector, tomorrow you can have a first diagnosis, then a second one, then if needed to have the analysis, and the last part of the value chain, which is operation, you can have it physically, or not, because you can robotize this. So, in one hand, we have a lot of doctors leaving Tunisia, and by the way, the education here is really good. To give you an example, another metric, in France, which is quite decent and very serious medical system, 50% of the exams for foreign doctors are succeeded by Tunisia. So imagine we can combine the digital facilities for these people. Not only you are going to keep them in Tunisia, but I mean you can create a combined medical digital sector.
Yes, and as you said, help bring some skilled workers back as well, because many Tunisians are working abroad in the medical profession.
And that's where maybe here again I have different opinion on this brains immigration. I think it's good for Tunisia. Mm-hmm. First, it's part of our history. I am from a generation which was helped by the Tunisia government to have education abroad. I think we have to forget to absolutely or to be obsessed by retaining our expertise. I think this is creating value because if you look at the examples of the startup to this morning, I mean, half of them are people who lived in Europe or abroad and came back again. So this, I think we have to think how to be a hub of education. Part of it will stay, part of it will move and come back again, and part of it are going to be the marketing vehicle for Tunisia abroad and doing business from abroad to Tunisia.
Yeah, diaspora are excellent ambassadors internationally for the country. I want to ask before we wrap up Samir and Michael to just give us your thoughts and advice on how can Tunisia future-proof its economy and how can it excel in the types of jobs and technologies and the economy that we'll see worldwide 20, 30 years from now. So just your final words of wisdom, and then we'll round out by asking the minister to react to what he's heard.
So I think the approach that should be taken is definitely on a sector-by-sector basis. I would, really encourage on a sector-by-sector basis for companies to focus on value addition. I think we've sort of entered a world where to be price leaders, that's always going to be a challenge. If you think about textiles, if you think about agro, Tunisia is in that lucky position where it is actually very close to Europe, and so increasingly becoming part of the European supply chains, I think, is something that should be, front of mind for companies in pharmaceuticals, industrials, agriculture. That then ensures both from a country standpoint that you're actually, you've got products that are being sold in very competitive markets in Europe as opposed to necessarily chasing, low-priced points down in the south. I think that's also important because from a current account balance, Tunisia is always going to be quite precarious. It can't entirely rely on tourism flows, and so support that the government can give to really push the whole export agenda, whether it's goods or services like BPOs, would probably be my biggest recommendation, and that cuts across a number of different sectors.
Thank you. Michael, get you a microphone.
Thank you. I've got two thoughts. The first one is, our data is very clear, is that economic numbers don't tell the whole story. So if you're looking at the economic development of the country, the FDI you're trying to attract, it's not just about GDP, income flows, even just about jobs created. You've got to be thinking about which industries are going to be most supportive of social progress in the country. Just to give you an example, we did some work in Costa Rica looking at the tourism sector, and we saw how different types of tourism have brought much bigger benefits than others in terms of the quality of life of citizens. So think about your sectors, think about the kind of industries you're trying to bring in and what they're going to contribute to the lives of people. Secondly, what I presented earlier, like all macro data, is averages for a country. And I think what we do see again in our data is that countries that are better at evening the spread of social progress across their geography tend to do better. Now, I can't tell you what the regional disparities are in Tunisia in social progress, but I bet there's a difference between the north and the south. And so making sure that everyone's included, thinking about that geographical, spatial issue, is going to be important for Tunisia's next stage of development. That's my two thoughts.
Thank you very much. I think Costa Rica actually provides a useful example in general for Tunisia, because it's good that Tunisia competes very well against its African peers and in a regional context, but of course it's really important to look beyond that and to be competitive in a global context. And if you consider Costa Rica a small country, again with the BPO, it had very little in the way of economic activity except tourism, but they went niche on the tourism and carved out a really special role in the value chain of tourism, protected their natural areas, and more than that, started attracting BPO, first at the very low level, bringing in call centers and moving on and up the chain. And now it's an extremely advanced economy compared to where it was years ago because they managed to upskill and then moving up from low-level manufacturing to making chips for Intel and so on. So I would argue that that's maybe, if Tunisia is looking for an interesting international example, that's one also very strong on social progress as well, especially compared to that region of the world that it operates in. So can see no reason Tunisia can't be the Costa Rica of Africa and this entire region. So I want to turn to Mr. Lathari now as we prepare to wrap up. I mean, you've been, I guess, listening to a lot of the discussions over these days and to the wisdom of your co-panelist here. And a lot of the findings are that everybody understands that there are opportunities here. People have bought into the idea of Tunisia as a gateway market to Africa and elsewhere. The skills levels are good. The investments in education have been appreciated and noted by foreign investors. However, always room to do more. Michael pointed out a few of the gaps there that could be looked at. Points have been made that there are many success stories. The micro stories, as we heard, are good, but there's still a need to focus on some of the macro. There have been a number of reforms. There had been a little bit of backsliding on some of the rankings, but it seems you've have reversed that, in fact, and are going to be moving back up the business rankings. There are a number of sectors of opportunity, everything from fintech, software and IT, BPO, as we heard, services in general, tourism, agribusiness, agro-processing, renewable energy, and more. So there's quite a lot here to work with, quite a lot of niches that can be built up, a lot of capabilities that can be harnessed, but it's an extremely competitive global environment, of course. And so I want to just give the minister a chance, I guess, to make your last pitch. What do you see? What is your plan for taking Tunisia and its economy into the future and taking investors along with you? And what kind of future are you asking them to buy into if they invest in Tunisia now?
Yeah, thank you. We actually believe that Tunisia has the ingredients to succeed, has all the ingredients of success. There is something we don't talk about a lot, but Tunisia is one of the countries in the region and in the world with zero problems with its neighbors and with, I think, the countries around in the Africa and the MENA region and Europe, obviously. And this is a big feature of how we see Tunisia as a country open to the world, and a country would like to be a bridge to the whole region. We are a country who don't interfere in the internal affairs of our neighbors. We are willing to build strong partnerships with anybody willing to build partnership with us. This is a country with a very old and strong merchant tradition. You know that Tunisia has been founded by Lebanese women 3,000 years ago. So there is really this strong willingness to build win-win partnerships with everybody. And this is a country with the most advantage of, have the most important advantage of having the people at its main wealth. We are not a country with huge natural resources, so we are investing in human resources, and we think that our diaspora, as has been said many times, here has really also a strong asset for us. So our vision is we are in a very, very dynamic region. The MENA region and the Africa region will be a very important region in the future. We are expecting to have 2.5 billion of human beings in Africa in the next few decades. One out of maybe of four individuals will be African, And half of the global young population of the world, 50% of the people under 25 will be Africans. So this is a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity for the Africans and the Tunisians having the possibility to create and to develop a regional hub, a continental hub, in a MENA, African and Arab hub for education, for healthcare, for technology, for ICT, business, for entrepreneurship. This is actually the way we see Tunisia playing its regional role in the future. We see Tunisia as a smart nation, as a smart country, and we think that Tunisia is really able to be the smart nation in the region, and also the nation with the most favorable environment for business and the business-friendly environment, the best business-friendly environment in the region. So this is the vision we have. As I said earlier, the country suffered from a bad or negative perception these recent years regarding the turbulent dynamics in the region after the Arab Spring. But I think that Tunisia is now back, is really now gaining more confidence and trust in itself, and also our partners are trusting us more than before. I have been traveling these 2 last months in France, in Germany, in UK, in Italy, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in China, the United States, and I really very much appreciated the quality of the interaction I have with the people I met there, and I heard a lot in terms of enthusiasm to come to Tunisia and to build partnerships with us. There are a lot of success stories in the country. As you said earlier, the micro actually environment is very good. We have very good stories, and I think we have to now to brand the country accordingly. I think the country, in terms of branding, nation branding, is not very well understood. We have to work on it to make the country as a smart nation, as an open nation, as a democratic nation, as a very business-friendly nation, more understood, and to communicate more and to promote more this destination. Again, I thank all of you for your very stimulating and really interesting remarks, and learned a lot during these 2 days from the investors I met and from the people who participate in different panels. And my actually commitment is to continue this kind of dialogue with the private sector, with the foreign investors, with the different organizations doing a great job in terms of social progress, in terms of economic development. And we have to continue this dialogue, and we have to also to continue to entertain this good dynamism now we are witnessing in Tunisia, and I'm very optimistic about the future. As I said yesterday, I believe and we believe in this country and its huge potential, and I think that together we can do great jobs and great things. So again, thanks a lot for all of you for coming and for joining us and sharing with us your reflections and insight about Tunisia and about its economy and its investment in the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a great note to end on, and of course we're heading now into the lunch, and then there will be, I think, some more breakouts later, but I just want to say, of course, thank you to the Minister for sharing your time, and it's good to hear your passion for attracting investment and to working with business. This is obviously not the end of the dialogue. You have an open door, I assume, to keep engaging, working with investors and potential investors on these mutual projects to create this win-win with the public and private sector and with Tunisia and its international partners. I want to say thank you to our other excellent panelists for sharing your insights. Thank you for your attention. I'll ask that the panelists, if you stay, we'll have photo session and some certificates over there. For the rest of you, I think you can take off for lunch now. And thank you again for your time and attention and for the organizers allowing me to lead this session. Thank you.